Good afternoon and good evening to the rest of you. It is Q, your fearless host, and I'm still coming to you live from Mexico. And I am joined by Bitcoin legend himself, BTC Sessions. Ben, how you doing, man?
Not too bad, man. Keeping on, still hanging in there, still making videos. So good. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course, man. And a huge thank you. I know life has been a little tumultuous for the last couple of months for yourself. And we are in the Bitcoin community really appreciative of, I think, the legwork that you and the team are doing up north, despite the way some of the things have been shaking out. But maybe do you mind just sharing a little bit about sort of what's happened in the last couple of days and what you guys are looking to do next, if at all anything, whether it's safety, protection, what's been going on for you guys?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously online things have been a bit quieter. And I've been in contact with Nick, yesterday and the past few days here. So many people would have seen that. I can't recall the exact date, but, Nick went out and delivered a whole bunch of Bitcoin to individuals in Ottawa and basically handed it direct to them. And so if I'm not mistaken, between 14 and 15 Bitcoin were given out to individuals. And then the rest was remaining. I did get a message and I saw online, obviously, Nick tweeted out, police came to wherever he was the other day and basically took everything he had on him. I don't know what they took his phone, his computer, whatever the hell he had on his person, basically confiscated it all. So I have not been privy to the key or multi-sig arrangement for some time now, purposely. And so when he says that he no longer has keys, I don't know specifically what is meant by that in terms of, are all the keys compromised or what's going on. I do not know. But in the end, we know that 2/3, roughly, were around 14 or 15 Bitcoin, were given directly to individuals. And so those are in the hands of them at this point. But as per the rest, like Nick is okay, he's not, but basically, they took things that were in his custody or whatever was on his person at the time. And we're just kind of waiting to see what shakes out there. So that's kind of the state of where things are right now. In terms of plans and everything, again, I don't know what the state of that remaining Bitcoin is in terms of how that pertains to Nick. And even still, my understanding was that Mariva injunction basically made it so that anybody moving Bitcoin after that was filed or after they became privy to it would be there could be severe penalties after that point. So right now it's unfortunately just a lot of hurry up and wait. And so I'm waiting on, Nick messaged me yesterday when shortly after everything happened, just to kind of give me a heads up and let me know that he was okay. And so now it's just, I guess, just kind of waiting on messages, waiting to see how things play out. But that's where it's at, man. It is what it is.
No, I mean, it's a very tough and interesting time. I mean, we're seeing Bitcoin's use cases get tested in real time up north in Canada. We're seeing it tested in Eastern Europe as well, between both Russia and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things between all of these sort of uprisings is the wrong word, but all of these events, global events that are essentially occurring that are showcasing and putting Bitcoin on a global spotlight? You see a lot of positive press and support of, hey, look, this is what Bitcoin can offer. These are the freedoms it provides. But then you also see some other media talking about, hey, this is now Putin's out. This is the way the truckers are getting around, whatever it is. There's a lot of chatter on both sides of this. I guess, how are you trying to declutter that and help people really understand the pros and the cons of what we're seeing transpire?
So I think one of the big takeaways, I hope eventually proliferates through all of society, is that Bitcoin is simply a tool, and it is a level playing field for everyone across the board. People you do like, people you don't like, causes you agree with, causes you don't agree with, all of them can utilize Bitcoin because it is apolitical. It is just a free and open source software available to all. In terms of kind of what we've seen, again, we've seen it utilized in a lot of different ways. We've seen it utilized in Canada when the legacy finance was able to be captured and no longer useful to a subset of the population. We've seen it for people in Ukraine. I saw a story about somebody who was able, while escaping, to utilize Bitcoin to get their assets as they escape the country. We've seen, whether people agree with it or not, donations flood into Ukraine specifically. I believe via the official government Twitter account was tweeting out, Bitcoin addresses and so on and so forth. But again, just prior to that, we saw the Patreon freeze some money. So again, legacy finance failing them. And then we also see people throwing around the idea that, well, could this be used to evade sanctions? In its current state, I'm a little bit skeptical about that assertion, given the size of the asset for a country such as Russia to be able to move meaningful amounts of money through it. It's still relatively small, but I do see it as a tool also for Russians through no fault of their own, who, just because of what's going on politically, have effectively been penalized, right? Their currency is taking a major hit. They may not be able to utilize their bank accounts. There's long lineups at ATMs. They're basically financially getting screwed because of these geopolitical tensions, just for existing in a country where this is going on. So we are seeing it as a tool for people to insulate themselves from a variety of things. The other takeaways that I've kind of noticed is that in terms of what Bitcoin can do, we're learning a lot about that right now, and we're learning a lot about what tools should be used and how and when. Kind of tagging on to the saying, there's years where nothing happens, and then there's weeks where decades happen, something along those lines. I think this is one of those moments for Bitcoin where there's years where, people and things seem a little static. And then there's periods of a month or a few weeks where so much happens and so much is learned. And I think this is one of those times where this past month and however long into the future here, so much is going to be learned about Bitcoin's capabilities and what needs to be built next. And while it's scary at the time, I think for the future, this is going to further make Bitcoin more anti-fragile than it already is.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, Ben, I think, Bitcoin it didn't fail. Like some people said, oh, the trucker protest failed, or, it's failing in other spots. But just because the network doesn't fail doesn't mean that the people that use it can't be censored or confiscated, or and I won't say censored in terms of monetary, but doesn't mean that they can't hack your bank accounts or turn off your bank accounts, freeze your bank accounts, freeze your social media. So while the network of Bitcoin and the protocol still remains and works well, exactly what happened to Nick. I mean, they showed up at his house, which is kind of scary. Luckily, he wasn't harmed, at least physically, maybe emotionally and mentally. I can imagine that's pretty straining what he's going through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like at the end of the day, every individual is a person living in a jurisdiction with a government that may or may not favor what they're doing. And so, the tools that are available with Bitcoin, they're there, but we're still at that point in the world where you do live to a degree, for varying degrees for different people, but you're still very much plugged into the legacy financial system. So that's a very real worry for a lot of people. We saw that play out over the past few weeks. But as Bitcoin grows, as more people become privy to how it works, I think we do start to see more kind of circular economies be established, at least like in a back end as a just in case. And we already see this now. I think we also start to see new tools be built, but also people realize that they should be using the available tools now as often as possible. And so one of the things that have come to light in the past few weeks, especially for me, is that it should always be Bitcoin best practices, regardless of how minimal something seems initially. Things can grow very, very quickly. Things can change on a dime. I didn't think that things would move so quickly here in Canada. It started with, just to give some context, the Tallycoin page, the initial goal of the fundraiser was 10 million sats. So that's like $4,000. And so the initial thought was, oh yeah, we'll throw this up. We'll get maybe a few donations, and a few gas cards can be bought and given out, and there'll be a little protest and so on and so forth. And then within a week of the Tallycoin starting up, GoFundMe was frozen. They started to see issues with Give, Send, Go. A week and a half, 2 weeks in, the Emergencies Act was called. All of these different things started happening way faster than anybody expected. And on top of that, 20 something Bitcoin get donated, which was mind boggling, but also outlined that, again, best practices should be observed regardless of how initially small something may seem. And I think that a focus on privacy and privacy tools is something that's needed out of more people, myself included, moving forward, because the initial thought was, well, you gotta be super transparent, make sure that the initial thought was Bitcoiners don't trust verify. So you're going to want to see, okay, this went here, and so on and so forth. But in that thinking, there wasn't as much thought, and I blame myself for this, put on, well, what are the implications of if somebody didn't use privacy practices before donating, or moving forward, this gives like a very real single touch point moving forward to see where things go next. And so, looking at it now, it's like, well, it would have been great if I knew how to use it at the time, how to do like a BTC Pay server with a new address generated for every single donation that went directly into like a Sparrow wallet or Wasabi wallet CoinJoin that was then immediately distributed out, through a means which preserved the privacy of the individuals that got it. But unfortunately, with crazy things happening at an exponential pace, that's not how it played out. But there's definitely a bit more of a roadmap and some learning lessons there now. So, yeah.
Yeah. Bitcoin's definitely on the global stage. And I think Bitcoiners, we always talk about how big this network is. But I think when this all occurred, we didn't realize how big it was going to be. I mean, you guys are just trying to get 10 million sats, $4,000. You'd figure some people in Canada, maybe some Americans would donate. But I remember even looking at the Tallycoin page and not looking to dox anyone, but people are saying, I'm from England, I'm from Ukraine, I'm from, all over the world that started donating. And it's truly a global network, which, people always think in linear scale, and it's hard to think in logarithmic scale or exponential scale. So I think when donations are coming from all across the world, anywhere, across this network, whether it's Lightning or on chain, I can definitely see how things got out of hand in terms of the total amount of donations. And like I said, it was almost putting you guys and Nick and even the truckers at risk when the sums of money get that large. That obviously draws attention for local governments or even, national governments or globally.
Yeah. It's I guess it's a bit of a cautionary tale for all Bitcoiners out there that are doing anything that down the line could be interpreted as unfavorable to your government, which in essence could even be just having Bitcoin. That those best practices need to be in place. And you're absolutely right in terms of how wild it was to see people from everywhere, particularly with Lightning donations, because you would see something like somebody just on the opposite side of the globe would be like, I support this. I'm going to send a dollar from Ethiopia, like instantly for free, to land it in this thing. And, you saw dozens of messages from people around the world, just sending a dollar here or there. And that was pretty amazing to see. Bitcoiners, a lot of them tend to be, what's a good, I guess, freedom oriented people, or, they believe in the idea. A lot of them believe in the idea of, body autonomy or just choice in how you live your life. And so it resonated with a fair number of people, and a lot of people wanted to partake in that or show support in any way they could. And so, Lightning was one thing that enabled them to do that in any tiny way that they saw fit. I saw 100 sat donations come in. Like that's crazy, from around the world.
I know you touched on a little bit of just sort of what we could have done better in this instance, especially with Tallycoin and these donations. And we're watching now a new push over in Eastern Europe as well, donations coming into Ukrainians. We're seeing an influx of transactions in both Ukraine and Russia as well. What are some things that you would learn from this experience with Tallycoin and in Canada that you are hoping those in Ukraine and Russia either are aware of or you want to make them aware of?
So, in terms of tools, things like CoinJoin are incredibly useful. I also just did a video on a tutorial on paynims. And so what paynims are effectively, it's a publicly shareable ID that anybody can connect to and establish a connection between two users right now of Samurai Wallet, but other wallets are implementing it. And effectively, it allows you to receive addresses between two parties without having to publicly post them anywhere, while being allowed to publicly post your ID without doxing the individual addresses. Now, obviously, transactions still show up on the blockchain, but it doesn't give that easy point of, oh, this person posted this address. We know that's their address. So it definitely helps there. So that's actually something that's on Tallycoin. Tallycoin was an early supporter of paynims. Unfortunately, I was really unfamiliar with how to utilize paynims. Also, most wallets have not implemented, I think it's BIP 47 yet, to allow for that. But I do see rumblings of, Sparrow Wallet, Blue Wallet, maybe some others that are going down that path. And maybe this is the push that we needed to get some stuff like that, and maybe some others. I also saw Umbral update today with Join Market, which is pretty cool. You got Sparrow and Samurai with Whirlpool. You got Wasabi, CoinJoin 2.0 at some point dropping. So there are tools out there. There are things that I think people should be privy to, but also just in terms of just in general protecting your wealth. Like if you're trying to escape with some of your assets intact, you got to be careful in how those, how, if you're holding Bitcoin, how you have it, right? Because if it's just on a hot wallet on your phone, it's pretty obvious that somebody can just take that, right? And then where's your keys? But, in a pinch like that, brush up on your memorization skills, get those 12 words in your head. There's actually, you know what? I know this is a bit of a tangent, but there's a really good book called Moonwalking with Einstein. And it's about this guy, and he goes to write a story. I believe he was a journalist or an author. He goes to write a story on the memory championship, where all these people like have incredible memories and can like memorize decks of cards in like 10 seconds and things like that. And he goes and he starts learning from one of the masters that was in the world championship. And just a few years later, he ends up placing, I think, in the top 10 just from learning the skills of memorization. And so there's a really cool concept that they cover called creating a memory palace. And it's basically you pick a spot that like your house or a familiar place, and you walk in your mind through that place, and then you have odd things that would be probably your seed phrase, those individual words that would pertain to that at specific parts as you walk through a certain pathway in that familiar place. So, one of the words is goat, and you get to your front door and there's a goat baying at you at the front door. And so you walk through your house and you have certain triggers, and it makes it easier to remember those 12 to 24 words. And I've done that in the past, and surprisingly, it actually works well because you create a story for yourself in your mind, and it makes it very difficult to forget those words. So Moonwalking with Einstein is the book. It is not at all about Bitcoin, but it definitely pertains to it now.
I agree. And I think that's really good. And to your point, I mean, right now, I think we talk about, Cold Card or the Foundation Passport or Ledger or Trezor or all these devices. Right now, if someone were to see this, they think it's like a rinky, weird calculator, or they think it's like a USB stick if it's a Ledger or Trezor. But going forward, those things, if it has truly global adoption, which we believe it will, these devices become recognizable. And you think in terms of, it may not be a gold brick or a gold bar, but, if you're trying to cross the border and you get stopped by some foreign regime invading your country, they're like, oh, what's this? They know what it is. And then they pocket the device. They might have a hard time getting into it, but that's another thing, but still confiscating the devices that you use. So I definitely think, you get to the point where the only way to stop it is to have it in your mind, and you hope that they don't try and torture you to get it out of you. But I guess we'll have to be trained like KGB spies or, by the Navy SEALs to resist tactics such as torture and stuff like that, future Bitcoiners. I hope that's not the case. The world that we build is better than that. But, it's a scary place for sure.
Yeah. And again, to your point that, $5 wrench attack is always a possibility, even outside of the whole nation state, times of war kind of scenario. And so, making yourself resistant to $5 wrench attacks, perhaps with even something simple as passphrases, right? Passphrases and decoy accounts. I just did a tutorial on seed XOR with Cold Card. So you can effectively take your seed phrase and split it in two. So it's two separate seed phrases. each one of those functions as a regular wallet as well. So you could put decoy amounts in those, but when you combine them through a seed XOR, they become a singular separate wallet. And you can also put a passphrase on top of that. So even if somebody was privy to what that was and went to look, then they wouldn't be familiar. But even just putting a single passphrase on a regular seed in instances like this, it becomes that plausible deniability piece that can help people that maybe somebody is trying to cross a border with a hardware device. But there's definitely tools available to people to prevent those types of things from happening, or at least like, you have your sacrificial lamb that you offer up. But yeah.
Q, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all of the insight on that. I was trying to take notes on a couple of things that I could just personally do better. I know that my personal self-storage habits aren't necessarily the best. I was teasing everyone that before heading down to Mexico, was frantically trying to take all of the Bitcoin on my phone and put it onto my hard drive wallet because I don't want to do that. But I'm a little curious because I'll just say it like this. I smoked way too much weed to like trust myself to actually remember my 24 word phrase in a row. Like that's the simple fact. Mm-hmm. I have the card stock scattered actually around the country. I have it in a couple of safes as well as in a couple of trusted people's possessions. And I've been going back and forth on like buying a metal card, but I'm kind of curious of your thoughts on just like the idea of or dealing with losing or not being able to access your key versus just losing your actual Bitcoin. Like what to you is a worst case scenario?
I mean, yeah, a lot of people, I don't think they've really thought through their backup and their process for key storage as thoroughly as they should, because again, things can turn on a dime, as we've seen, and so I would say to people that are wondering, how to tackle this kind of thing. Imagine if somebody kicked in your door right now, and whoever it may be, maybe you're living in a country where they're going to kick in your door and they're going to steal all your shit. And they're going to demand all your keys and everything. How prepared are you for that? Are they going to get everything? Is all of it going to be gone? If the answer is yes, if somebody could like hit you with a wrench for a few minutes and you actually could give them all of your Bitcoin, you should probably be in a better position than that. Things like, again, simplistically, if you don't have, a lot of funds to be buying multiple devices and so on and so forth, add a passphrase to whatever hardware wallet you have, and then put a small portion of your Bitcoin outside of the passphrase, just in the default wallet. There, you've got some plausible deniability. So in that worst case scenario, a better option would probably be a geographically dispersed multi-sig. And so if you don't trust yourself a lot, then maybe you're going with something like Unchained Capital or Casa. And in that instance, I think it's just a personal preference, but in having tried both, Unchained, I like not having to have like a specific Casa app involved, but again, that can be up to the individual. But regardless, if you have a geographically dispersed multi-sig, then there's a lot of fault tolerance there, right? You can lose a lot of shit and still be okay. So let's say you had something at Unchained because you're like, holy shit, I need a something idiot proof so I could really screw up with something like an Unchained vault. how's that play out? Well, you've got two devices, whatever those may be, cold card, ledger, Trezor, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter. But you've got two hardware devices and you've got a backup of each. You could store those two devices in different locations, and then you could store those two backups in totally different locations than that. And at that point, Unchained has one key. You do give up with them. They do know how much money you have in the vault. So there's a privacy trade-off there. So keep that in mind. But just in terms of how much you could massively screw up, well, you could lose 75% of the things that you're supposed to be keeping track of and still be okay, right? If you have either device or either backup, you could then go to Unchained and be like, yo, I literally lost almost everything, but I have one key left. I can sign. Can you sign the other half of this transaction? And you're still fine. So you can make it really robust and fault tolerant. And have like a responsible third party if you see fit, or you can set up your own multi-sig and make it pretty fault tolerant as well. So yeah, I don't know if that, I know I went on a bit of a rant there, but there's a lot of options for that. But in the end, if somebody could kick in your door and take all your Bitcoin, you're probably not secure enough.
I would agree for sure. And I think it's funny too, because you're trying to always, you're trying to $5 wrench attack yourself. Like I even think of it like this, you know, some people that are like, oh, I'm only going to keep it to my memory. I think I've heard rumors that the Winklevoss have done that or whatever. Maybe they're twins, so they have twin telepathy, so they can know what the other half of the passphrase is. But the issue then becomes like very real incident. You can get hit by a car and you have brain damage, and then you're trying to give it to your heirs or your family or whatever, and they don't know the passphrase that you had in your mind that you never wrote down. Or, you know, all of a sudden you develop Alzheimer's. You know, we're trying to think multi-generational or long, low time preference, you know, long time horizon. You know, all of a sudden you develop a memory loss condition, and then, you know, you don't remember what the passphrase is, one of the first things to go. So yeah, there's a benefit to being robust. I think there's even a benefit to storing in multiple different wallets. When I first came into this space, I was like, I'm going to have one device. I'm going to have all of it. I'm just going to bury it in the backyard and hide it somewhere really good and no one will know. But then it's like, oh, well, if someone like holds a gun to my head and says, you have to get it, I'm like, all right, maybe, you know, is this bullet worth it? And then no one knows where it is. So, you know, if you have it in different places, if they get a piece of your stash or a part of it, you know, that's not all of it. So that's always a good compromise. Yeah,
exactly. Having some degree of, again, it's not a catastrophic failure if some of it is lost. At least some of it is available. So you can have degrees of that, right? You can have a hardware wallet at home that has some, you could have maybe a multi-sig, maybe something else, and maybe a passphrase. But if it's kind of spread in multiple places, if you have the resources and the funds to do that, then, you know, make yourself resilient and resilient to various.
And I think of it even just like tying back to the legacy financial system. You think of it like, what are banks insured to? I know in the United States, they don't know in Canada, but they're insured up to 250,000. Maybe they bumped it up to 500,000. When you think of all the billionaires out there, you know, they don't just have one house, one business, whatever. Like they have multiple properties of real estate. That's kind of like different assets they have. You know, maybe if you're Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, you have like your stocks, but you know, Tesla does a lot more than they're trying to sell batteries. They're trying to sell cars. They're like in different geographical locations. So think of it like you're trying to build a business. You know, a billionaire is not going to stick $1 billion in, you know, however many banks a billion splits up by 500,000. You know, that just doesn't make sense. They put it into different assets, and you can look at assets in terms of different hardware wallets, different custody setups, different multi-sigs, you know, pairing with Casa and Unchained if you think that's a better setup. But that's just kind of the way I build, you know, the future of finance from a Bitcoiner's perspective.
Yeah.
I got a question for the two of you, because something you said, Chris, kind of triggered a weird thought in my mind. But like the whole idea that like, I think all three of us are on the same page that we'll never spend our Bitcoin. If I need to, I will take some sort of a loan against it in the same way that Elon takes loans against his Tesla shares, or Saylor kind of explained the way the New York elites used to take it against their real estate. In a very hyper secured future where I can't see how many Bitcoin you have, nor you would be able to see how many I have. What's to stop anyone from getting some sort of a loan from whatever that centralized monetary policy is in their locale to say, hey, I want a loan against 5 Bitcoin that's buried in my backyard, when in reality it's 0.5 Bitcoin or it's 0.1 Bitcoin. Like, what's to stop that, and how do we prevent that?
I mean, I'd imagine you'd just have to demand some sort of a signature, right? But typically, like if you're offering up collateral, from what I've seen so far, it kind of depends on how you're doing it. Like right now, some of the bigger names out there require you to deposit the collateral in order to get the loan. Again, like I don't think anybody's going to offer a loan if you just point to a UTXO and say that's mine. I wouldn't be lending you shit. But
I'm gonna find Sailor's UTXO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you mean you don't trust Satoshi's wallet? That I say that I own.
Yeah.
But I want to push back a little bit on this, because this idea that, okay, fine, we will have to, in some degree, publicize it to these entities, while at the same time having to focus on security. It's almost like we're diverging this path. Like in my head, it almost feels like there are going to be some Bitcoin that will be publicized for use cases such as being used to purchase things, for loans, whatever it may be. And then there were others that are just going to be held sort of for security purpose and safekeeping. And in doing that, does that create almost a fork, if you will, or a false fork where, hey, 60% of the supply is tucked away and hidden, whereas 40% is circulating? And is that necessarily a good thing or a bad thing for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I guess I'll expand on that, Q. I think, in the future, if you're working with best privacy practices, perfect example, like let's just say you and I are doing a deal. I'm buying $100 worth of Bitcoin from you, or whatever, $100 object. And, when I'm giving you the $100 in cash, because I'm handing it to you, that I have $100, but I could have $1 million in the bank that you don't know about. So I think that there's going to be ways, whether you want a loan for $100, $1,000, whatever the amount be, that this is where we talk about having different accounts, different multi-signature, different Lightning wallets, different hardware wallets, whatever it may be. Just because we're operating off one, if we see it on chain, you're assuming it's base layer on chain, you can see that Bitcoin and, you kind of know, or maybe we're operating on Lightning and you could just see the channel that you're connected to because I told you what it is. But in the future, you don't know if you break up your Bitcoin into multiple devices, you don't know that I own all these devices or all these UTXOs. You're just dealing in the paradigm, the parameters of what you see basically, and what we're trying to negotiate.
Also, right now it sounds like we're kind of thinking in the context of the regular legacy KYC world, but like when you think about it, if you have physical collateral in terms of like actual Bitcoin and you want a loan against that Bitcoin, you could put that into some sort of a multi-sig escrow. And again, without if there's digital dollars in whatever form those may take, you don't need identity. The collateral is there. The collateral is the thing that makes the loan viable. So why do you need to know somebody's name if the collateral is going to sit in that escrow until the loan is paid back? So in terms of like privacy there, who the hell cares who it is? If the Bitcoin's sitting in escrow and there's some sort of mechanism where, if you don't pay back, then the collateral goes to the loaner, then it doesn't matter who you are.
I'm going to ask something because I'm going to keep diving down this rabbit hole with you if you'll entertain it. And I'm definitely thinking of things through the lens of the current systems we have in place. But for example, BitMEX getting absolutely grilled on their whole potentially having money laundered through their system because they don't know necessarily who's coming through their system, putting money in, withdrawing it, etc. does that not essentially prevent a system from being created out of that fear that, all right, well, I need to pause for a second and reiterate, I'm a hardcore Bitcoiner. I do not buy into the FUD that, like only criminals use Bitcoin. I'm just trying to present the other side of this argument. So don't get mad at me when I say certain things right now. But like, if it turns into that and all of a sudden we don't actually know who is depositing this money, I feel like that argument of, hey, criminals are using Bitcoin, they're flocking to Bitcoin right now because no one needs to know who they are. They can just clean their money, or they can quickly grab cash, whether it be dollars or whatever other fiat currency they want. Does that not set us back, I think? Or I think it sets us back. Do you not agree with that?
I mean, we already see people pointing to any instance of using Bitcoin for something they don't like as, oh, this is horrible, we need to get rid of it. Oh, this is using almost as much as Christmas lights. This is terrible. Let's shut it down. So, we see those instances everywhere. But in the end, is it a temporary setback where people say, who bad people are using this? Sure. I mean, we've seen a lot of that through the past. That was like the first major spotlight on Bitcoin was bad people are using this. They're getting drugs and stuff. In the end, it'll be, is it useful to the two consenting adults that wish to get a loan or extend a loan? Is it useful to the individual that's, escaping a country with their assets intact? Does it set us back in the public image based on what MSNBC and CNN are going to peddle to us? Sure. Do we care in the long run? Probably not. I mean, I don't. So, yeah, like in the end, it's as the topic came up initially, it's a tool that is equal access to everybody on the planet, anybody with an internet connection. So lots of people that maybe don't have a use case for it themselves may find it to be less than ideal and may want to ban it and may want to do all kinds of things. But it will still continue to exist through all of that. And eventually, everybody will have a use for it in some way, shape, or form, whether they know that they're using it or not. It may just be that they're sending dollars to euros, across the pond. And then you go, you just use Bitcoin for that. Do you know that? And, oh, I guess I do have a use case for it. So, I think that's where we're headed. And eventually when people see, oh, I am using it, I didn't even know, like people using a telephone today are using the internet. And when previously they may have, when telephone companies started utilizing the internet and using that infrastructure for their lines, people who previously didn't see the point in the internet all of a sudden were using it without being privy to it. So it is what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And I always make this joke, like saying about like Bitcoin nodes, like I see a Bitcoin node as basically like a modem or a router for, how's it going? Yeah, I see a Bitcoin node as a modem or a router for basically like what in layman's terms, and kind of what you were saying before too about like people using it. We see this use case that in Ukraine right now, they're using it to flee the country while Russians are using it as their currency is collapsing. So it's kind of a mixed use case that, maybe they don't like each other. Maybe they do. Maybe they have family members that are Russian. They're just kind of the innocent bystanders that are being hurt by all of this. But just kind of showing Bitcoins for everyone and Bitcoins for enemies, it has different use cases. While some people are calling for Russia not only to be cut off the SWIFT system, but to be removed from crypto exchanges, such as Kraken or Binance or whatever. And I know the leaders of those countries are kind of in a very difficult spot, sorry, not of those countries, of the exchanges are in a very difficult spot. I know even we talked about it yesterday, Q and I, Jesse Powell of Kraken, the CEO, was saying that he was not going to shut off the Russians' bank accounts or their basically accounts on the exchange. And because he basically said it's like a slippery slope. If you start doing this, and he even made a little small dig at the US, he's like, because if we should be doing turning off bank accounts of people that are unjust or
creating war.
Yeah, exactly. For creating war, then we should shut off the US bank accounts. And that's not a very viable business model, is kind of what he concluded, like tongue-in-cheek answer. And Q and I really like that response. Q, do you have anything to add to the Ukraine-Russia part of this?
I actually, I want to add a little bit to that conversation and give Ben an opportunity to comment if I can finish my words. Something that I've been thinking about a lot since we had that discussion yesterday, quite frankly, is there seems to be this, I'm just going to be very blunt, a lot of hypocrisy from the Bitcoin community right now. Whether or not you agree with what is going on, to prevent people from accessing their funds and money that they worked and spent time to earn, I thought we were all on the same page that that's unacceptable behavior. I thought we were all on the same page that when Canada did that to the truckers through GoFundMe and then started attacking bank accounts, that was financial terrorism. And then here we are, because someone else is doing something that we don't agree with, we're trying to kick them off the network. I personally, as it sat with me more and more, it's kind of upset me. And I think Jesse's answer is great, but I want to take it a step further, where just because we don't agree with them, just because they're doing something that we don't value or agree with, does not mean we take away their money. That's just my 2 cents on it, but I don't know if I'm taking it a step too far, and I'd love your 2 thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's totally fair to, again, like back to kind of circling back to the beginning of that conversation. It's a tool. Everyone can use it. The whole point is removing the ability of anyone to exert any control over the actual base layer network of value. And so, with that is going to come bad people using it, good people using it, all kinds of people using it, everybody in between, and who defines good or bad. But in the end, it's simply a tool. And in my opinion, it's far greater to have all of the small individuals be able to have absolute control and this extreme form of private ownership, as opposed to giving control to a government, whether we think that government is good or not. Because when you give that kind of control, not only do you have to trust that the current regime is acting altruistically, but you also have to trust that every government thereafter will also act altruistically. And we know that will never, ever be the case. There's always going to be some shady thing that happens in the background. There's always going to be some person that has misaligned incentives. You can come here. And there's always going to be that perversion that happens where somebody wants to siphon off wealth somewhere. Somebody wants to cut off a protest that they disagree with. Somebody wants to do something and not give everybody else a fair shake. And so, I much prefer, much like things have developed with the internet, where in the end, everybody can use it. I know obviously there's hubs and social media platforms that may prevent certain things, but at the same point, everybody can still use the internet. And so I think it's important that we get to that place with money as well. And money is apolitical, as I said before. And I think it should just merely be a tool. And if somebody does something that's illegal, or if somebody does something that's awful, then that should be addressed outside of the context of the global value network.
You hit the nail on the head, and perfect example. I mean, it's a tool. That's what we kind of keep saying. if someone takes a hammer and they build a house, we don't have a problem with that. But if they take it and they harm someone with it, that's a different story. If someone takes a baseball bat and they play a game of baseball, we're cool with that. But if they, attack someone with that, that's a different story. It can go with guns, it can go with money. These are all just tools. And, the way that you use the tool is the way that you judge the person or whatever the situation. It's saying like, oh, to ban all guns or whatever it may be. And then you run into authoritarian governments, or, if someone's using a gun to hunt to provide for their family, that's a lot different story than someone using it to harm other people or masses of people. It's all very nuanced, and it's all case by case. I know a lot of times Bitcoiners, we really believe in property rights and bodily autonomy. But at the end of the day, we do believe in laws. We believe in Bitcoin's law or protocol, and then there's kind of property laws built on top of that. How people should operate in their day-to-day life. I think we would all agree, if there's a law or not, me going out and harming another human being just by evolution and nature, we'd say, okay, that's not acceptable. You can't do that. Maybe back in the days of a caveman, you beat up another guy and you take whatever he has in order to assert your dominance. But we've kind of evolved as a society, and we're seeing this through the evolution of money as well.
So you're telling me the evolution of humanity when centralized governments beat us up and take all of our hard-earned money and taxes and whatnot, that this is socially acceptable?
No, I would disagree with you there, Q. I guess anything else you have to add or expand on, Q?
No, I cut Ben off, but I just wanted to tease you a little bit, because my first thought was, yes, we have grown as a society. However, I don't think every single intention is tried and true. I think the human instinct, unfortunately, is greed. And rather than punish instinct, I think we need to lean into it. And one of my first conversations on this show with Eric Yates, his book, The Seventh Property, incredible book. We had a book club segment. Everyone needs to check this book out. But he talks a lot about the fact that like humanity and humans we are instinctively greedy. So rather than create systems that prevent the greed from being a benefit to the system, let's lean into that and design a system that allows for greediness to actually prosper, not in the sense of individual greed, but communal greed helping to grow. I don't think I explained that very well, but Eric, if you're out there listening, come back on.
Yeah, a lot of what you guys are saying is reminding me of a lot of the premise in and behind the sovereign individual, where they talk about the world and how it works being a product of the monopoly on violence. And Bitcoin kind of throws a wrench into those cogs, right? It diminishes the effect of the monopoly on violence, right? To an extent. Obviously, again, like we can still see that individuals can still be coerced into giving up keys and so on and so forth. But in the end, like if you have a robust setup, it can still be prevented from being removed, being taken, especially on a nation state level. That's a possibility. So this monopoly on violence is gradually being reduced. And it also plays into a little bit, I don't agree with every concept, but a little bit about what Jason P. Lowry talks about in terms of we're moving from kind of this global show of force kinetically to exuding that through energy, and Bitcoin being a network that is supported by energy, and I see a little bit of that. His war comparisons, I don't always fully agree with, but I do see some kind of something there. There's some sort of string that can be tugged on in this move away from kinetic warfare, physical warfare, or at least diminishing that aspect of it because the cost could be too great in terms of not being able to just create value out of nothing anymore.
Yeah, and I'll definitely expand on that as well, because instead of going to war with the country, if you could psyop them or control their social media or see what they see, and kind of I don't want to get the tinfoil hat out, but like if you could control that, that's definitely more valuable, and it causes less loss of life to your own citizens and your own people, while also controlling the narrative and controlling what's going on around the world. I think Bitcoin mining is a big part of that as well. You're expending your energy and resources, and you're trying to compete to be the most efficient to control the global money supply. The U.S. hegemony, we've kind of benefited of being, the global reserve currency. There's debates of whether it's 100 years, whether it's 50 years, whether it's, right after World War II. There's many debates on that. But, I think Nolan was saying in one of the segments of the breakup, he says, if you have to say you're famous, you're not famous. And he was kind of saying that the US is looking at like that right now. It's saying, we're the global reserve currency. It's like, well, are you or are you not? Like, you sound a little scared when you're saying that, it's either you are used or you aren't. And going on that point, like basically with Bitcoin, you're competing to have the most amount of hash rate, which in turn is you being able to generate the most amount of wealth via Bitcoin that's rewarded by doing so. So in a fully global and decentralized network, that is the miners, or at least we hope so, as it expands and grows, that all the countries are competing to move the global, the global dominance around the world. And it can change in an instant. You're building more miners and you start plugging them in, or, one country like China bans it and then it moves to the US, and that it swings, the balance of power and global reserve status to more of the United States. Obviously, us as a nation state, and I'm saying, I guess, North America in general, to include Ben, but you're kind of fighting for the hash rate in order to be the global reserve status, basically.
I love this idea too, because let's dive into a world where, Bitcoin is the world reserve and everybody's competing for that share of global hash rate. If you do become the most dominant hash on the planet, then effectively anybody that is your enemy in utilizing, and let's say after the block reward is gone and the whole network is simply subsidized by on-chain fees and settlement transactions, so on and so forth, all of a sudden your enemies are now paying you to use the global network for value. And so it becomes this ebb and flow, this push and pull where if you want to be the one that's getting paid, you want to be the largest global hash. And so that game theory playing out of getting, like, imagine in the context of what's happening right now, if that's how this was playing out instead, where the US and Russia are competing to be the top global hash, and China in there, and Western kind of like Europe, all that. Everybody's competing to be that top global hash, so that their enemies or their their opposition are effectively paying them to use our global network of value. That's pretty interesting to see. It would be pretty interesting to see exactly how that game theory plays out, and what that means for policy. And because it's, does somebody then try to skirt the network effects of Bitcoin? I think it would be pretty difficult at that point. And so, and we kind of, there's so much going on right now because, Russia is talking about a one world currency. Is this the opportunity where we see maybe Western nations start to gravitate towards decentralized options, to maybe peak at Bitcoin? I don't know if many politicians are there yet, but I could see that maybe eventually playing out if we see this alternative currency come out of Russia, and the only, either we see a equally centralized option come out of the US and compete for a while, or we see eventually one side or the other capitulate to Bitcoin as a better network effect. So we'll see.
I think one of the things that spurred in my mind during this, and we've talked about sort of the potentials of a hash war and what that looks like, but I think a secondary layer to this, and I'm curious your thoughts, not just controlling the hash rate, but controlling the manufacturing of the components of mining rigs, because like so much semiconductor manufacturing comes out of Taiwan. China goes and takes Taiwan right now. We're not getting new ASICs for quite some time. All the other components that go into it, whether it's also just the energy capture, energy release, all of these factors and control of it, it almost seems as though if one country can really master and get a hold of it all, there's no telling how high they can actually push their own country's hash rate and hash capabilities. But at the same time, if it is so decentralized in a way where there are 8 different countries that all manufacture an equal amount or within 2 to 5% of the total semiconductors that are introduced into the entire world, that I think helps to decentralize this. But I don't see how we get to that scenario when we're already struggling with trying to get to a scenario where just not Taiwan is producing, or just not Taiwan and China are producing all of our stuff.
We've seen Blockstream make some moves there, right? Like they're looking into fabrication of that. I think
TSMC is coming to Arizona. I do want to point that out, and yes, I own shares of that, so I have to legally say that.
But I mean, we are starting to see. I think perhaps we start to see what we saw with global hash over the last couple of years, right? In terms of chip fabrication, right? We've seen a continual decentralization of where globally the hash rate is located, in no small part due to China banning it last summer, which was like the biggest bungle of geopolitical bungle of all time, in my opinion. I think we'll be looked at one of those eventually. But I think chip fabrication, it's becoming very clear that this needs to be at least not just in a single locale or a couple locales. It needs to be in more places, and we're seeing the beginnings of that. My hope is that we're looking at this 5 years, 10 years from now, saying, "Oh man, look at all the options that we have for chip fabrication." I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I mean, Ben, we've had a great time talking to you. I think we got to start wrapping up here. Q, is there anything else you want to ask or add?
I just want to ask you, because I know you will be there, and I believe you were there last year as well at the conference, but what are you most excited for at Bitcoin 22, other than yourself speaking on stage?
I'm more nervous about that, but I'm just excited to see everybody. Like when you it's awesome interacting with Bitcoiners online, but it's really awesome interacting with Bitcoiners in person. Like it's like a giant family reunion. Last year was incredible. Just I couldn't walk 5 feet without seeing somebody that I had interacted with online or had been talking to forever, and to finally actually be able to give that person a handshake or a hug or whatever, and just sit down and shoot the shit and talk Bitcoin in person. Like it's the feeling is electric. And so I'm very excited about that. I'm going to try and catch as many talks as I can, but just being in the presence of a lot of people that I respect and that I feel this bond with, and with being around people of like values can often be an event that is few and far between with Bitcoiners. You don't get those opportunities quite as often unless you're at regular meetups. So I can't wait to see everybody. And if anybody sees me there, come say hi, because I'm very excited to meet every Bitcoiner that I get to come across.
Yeah, Ben, thanks so much for coming on. It was a pleasure having you here. Hopefully we could go on and do this for hours. Hopefully we can do that at Bitcoin 2022. Obviously, you can use code YTMAG for 10% off your conference tickets. Excited to see you guys all there in Miami Beach from April 6th to the 9th. Ben, once again, thanks for coming on. And thanks for coming on. We'll cut to a commercial break real quick, and then we'll get the next segment going of FedWatch.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, peace out.